There we go. Let's get some people in here first before we get started. Ooh, 4 concurrent viewers. Look at that number. Just soar to the heavens. What's up, Mr. Smith? We'll give everybody a couple minutes to trickle in. By everybody, I mean the 15 to 20 are you that we get here. It should be good, Twisted Door. I just wasn't talking, is all. Really it. Ooh, up to 11. It's a big show here. Don't mind the battle scar on the cheek. I saw some people pointing it out in the strategy show. Roughhousing with the old dog before the show started, and he gave me one to the face. So. Oh well. We'll start this one off. Wavy Jones's question. Are Osmos projections auto-loaded into FC now? Yes, they are. What is your preferred range of randomness on tonight's slate? I don't mess with it on a slate by slate basis. I've been just setting 25% FC Pro randomness and calling it a day. Over the last year or so, I've become less and less interested in any like really big randomness numbers. I don't tie it to standard deviation or anything now. Sean Indy, I'm surprised that you're able to make it to this office hour streams. I figured you would have been too busy setting up that TJ Warren all-star party. You're good, Twisted Door. See what else we've got. Yeah, circling it back, the Manny Ramirez in chat asked about tutorial videos on either Cruncher or Excel. A tutorial, it would be I would have to teach an Excel class, and I don't mean that in any sort of way, but like it's not anything that I can do in just an hour or two. It would be just an incredible amount of time. We would probably try to monetize it in some way as a big time feature. So not anytime soon. I just don't have the time to. I mean, it would be hours and hours and hours of work, and I just don't have that in the schedule right now. Maybe during baseball season, but I wouldn't be surprised if that didn't happen. What's up, Damien? Oh, literally, what's up? Welcome to Awesemo.com, I guess. How do you assess value on a slate to slate basis? Obviously, yesterday, tons of value. How would I assess it for today's slate? Couple ways you can go about that. I think the easiest way, I wish I had yesterday's sheet still saved. This would be tough to give the full example. Basically, one of the things that, one, you kind of just know. Like on a day like yesterday, you see 15 different dudes at 4K projected for 35 minutes or game time or something, and you just sort of know that there's a lot. Something that I do periodically, I don't really pay attention to it too much just because, I don't know, it's mostly just something that I can eyeball now. It's not something that I have to pay attention to all that much. I take my implied ownership numbers across my entire player pool, and I use those as weights for salary for a particular site. And then when I sum those up, I can get an idea of like how efficient each dollar is. So, for example, everybody in this column that I'm highlighting right now is part of my FanDuel player pool. I haven't updated any, so like don't get caught up on the logistics of like individual people. I haven't updated anything since the end of the strategy show. But this is everybody that would be legitimately in my player pool. So I have those guys marked as ones. I have an implied ownership number, so basically how much I think they should be owned. And then I have their salaries. So if basically I can multiply their salary by their implied ownership, divide by the sum of implied ownership, and get basically a full salary. In this case, since my implied ownership totals 900%, which is exactly what you can have in term, you have one guy at 9 positions, that's 900%. The weighted average salary for that is $56,628, which lets me know that there's a little bit of value on here. You know what? If this number is in like the 59,000 or higher range, it's basically just like a neutral slate. If this number goes north of 60K, then it's a little bit more difficult to find value. Most of the top guys are carrying the weight, and there's not a lot of easy ways to get to them. So I just use that as an eyeball factor to know sort of how much I'm going to be playing guys that are priced down. But it's not really something that I pay attention to all that much. You could usually just kind of tell by looking at the ownership projections, and you see like, oh, there's 5 guys at 45% owned or whatever, and that'll make it a little bit easier. Do I have a favorite group rule for this slate? I don't really use groups in the NBA outside of just keeping like very specific timeshare split. So like I would never want Jared Allen plus DeAndre Jordan, or what would be another example? That's a good one, at least. Nikola Jokic plus Plumlee, stuff like that. But I don't generally set any groups. What percent of my bankroll do I risk each day? If I'm playing with $100, let's say, what percent of that should I enter? Oh God, that's a much bigger question. So your bankroll isn't necessarily what you have in FanDuel. You have to include anything that you would be willing to put back in. So if $100 is the only money you are willing to risk playing DFS, I would probably not be playing any more than 10% of that. So I would probably play $10 worth. Maybe, play like a 3 max and then max enter the nickel on FanDuel, something in that range. I don't really practice bankroll management. I play very, very little volume in comparison to what I could like in theory play. I'm more concerned with my day-to-day. My job comes first and foremost. If I don't have a show, I could have about $1,000 in play. If I have a show, I'm probably playing like $100 to $200. It really just depends on the day. I don't play DFS for anything other than just money to screw around with. It's purely a hobby of mine from the play standpoint. I prefer to be on the analytical side on the other end. What else we got? Yeah, so T McBee asked about putting together like a piece regarding negative correlations and primary backups. The problem is that's something that we would need to pay attention to a lot on a day-to-day basis, and I just don't think that there's that much value in it. Like, I don't think that I've really set a group. I've probably set a group once or twice all season. So, do I change or adjust my target score calculations for each player based on slate size, or do I use set calculations regardless of slate size? That's a good question. I will increase the constant of my target score calculation if there's like a day like yesterday where you have multiple guys under 4K. I will raise the bar of that constant to make sure that you need to get more points out of a cheaper guy. So that'll be the difference of changing it from a constant of like 10 to 14 or something. Nothing too outrageous, but I usually don't really change it out all that much. So do I pay attention to the payout percentages in cash games, or do I just join any contest that I'm interested in, no matter the payout? I pretty much just join whatever I want, regardless of payout. That's really not a great rule, though. In theory, I should pay attention to it more. But again, it's just one of those things to me that I don't care all that much. Last time Alex answered the bankroll question, he said 10% if you're comfortable with losing that and reloading, 5% otherwise. Okay, perfect. I did not hear him say that, but makes me feel good that I said 10%. On a slate like last night with crazy amounts of value that are all going to be high owned, but the slate ownership projections are likely to be further off from actual, do I emphasize my projections more or less when filtering out lineups? It doesn't really change for me. I'm emphasizing my projections in a very similar way for most. I'm basically like 60 to 70% of my rank is going to be just based on my projections alone. Is Fantasy Cruncher worth paying for from a casual player? I want to make a more aggressive hobby, but not sure spending $40 to input 5 lineups is really beneficial. I would say that it's not necessarily about the lineups. It's about how much money you have in play. So think about it like this. Plot out a month and what you would expect your return to be. If you're playing a small volume and like making $100 over the course of a month would be like a pretty big month for you, then allocating 40% of that to Fantasy Cruncher is probably not quite worth it. If you're playing $100 a night, I think that it's a very reasonable expense to try and better yourself. If I played one lineup a night, if I were playing for a high enough amount of money, I would want to use Fantasy Cruncher anyway, because I want to know the information that's coming out. I will never build lineups as good as Fantasy Cruncher because it's a computer. I can tweak them to better fit trying to win a contest, but the mass generation is key for me. What should we do when there's a discrepancy between two people on Awesemo, i.e. Eddie ranks someone high but not projected well on Awesemo? That's up to you. I mean, I would always defer to Alex, probably. But that's just sort of DFS for you. There's no right answer. You need to learn how to weigh that information. Favorite all-around play on FanDuel? Probably Jabari Parker now. Travie G makes a good point. FC Light would be good. I think you can generate up to 20 lineups for that. Adam says, do I manually change all of Awesemo's projections? I would assume you would, just so that a ton of people aren't using the same thing, giving someone the same edge. For the NBA, I actually use my own. I've had an NBA model built from scratch for 5+ years now. I'm just more comfortable using this for myself for the NBA. I use Alex's projections for MMA, for NFL. I don't tweak them at all. I might have to lower, like if I get 80% of someone on a crunch, I might take somebody from 20 points to 19 or something, but I'm not going through and making any changes individually. I'll beat people in construction. Um, what else we got? Yeah, Jabari's probably the best play across the board today. Now, I don't know if there's been any other news that's come out. I had to run a couple errands since the strategy show was over. Ooh, I just realized that I did not upload the strategy show to the podcast. Let me do that now too. Why would that be like that? Oh, now I remember. Oh, this is gonna start playing this video. Whoops. Sorry, podcast people. I'll get you up there now. Strategy show Tuesday, November 5th. Nope, not November 4th. Start. There we go. Not converting. Oh, annoying. There we go. Not too familiar with Fantasy Cruncher, but I play every day with entry fees varying from $180 to $1,000 cash lineups. What would Fantasy Cruncher do for me? It's going to tell you, one, what your most optimal lineup is with very little effort. You'll have the ability to quickly generate a massive amount of lineups in a very short amount of time that will be closer to that optimal than anything that you could put together that quickly. I mean, if you're just playing one lineup and you're playing cash, you could probably get by with something other than Fantasy Cruncher. But for me, if I were playing $200 to $1,000 a night, I wouldn't even bat an eye. I would just have Fantasy Cruncher. At the very least, if I'm playing that much, I'm getting it for a month to figure out if I need it or not. Are you able to make a cash lineup with Cruncher? Yes. In theory, your cash lineup is the optimal lineup that you generate. I would try to get off of some like 1% owned guys to get a comparable value with slightly more ownership, because you're not trying to win the contest. You're just trying to finish in the money. But in theory, your cash lineup is just going to be your optimal. When you create 500 lineups and move them to Excel, how do you sort them and choose which ones you want? Easy peasy. I will show you. I'm opening up my Crunch workbook now. You guys give me 1 second. I just want to get this podcast uploaded. Sorry to the podcast people that don't have it already. Bada bing. Let's see, who was it? Me and Adam. Tuesday's 6-game NBA slate. All right, podcast will be on the feed in the next 15. There's that. So this is my NBA sheet, my Crunch workbook. So this is last night's crunches. This will load in. You know what? I run a crunch. Fantasy Cruncher. Why talk about old data when we can just make new data? I always say. Gannon, if you have the ability to enter no experience players contest, enter every single one of them you can until you can't anymore. That's the best contest you're going to be able to get into. Just don't even think twice. Do as many of those until they take them away from you. All right, so let's run a crunch. I'm going to need some boosts here. Let's bump that to 150, 100. Should be good. Not have a salary? Why is John Collins still in my player pool? Ah, it's DK. No wonder. All right, so let's grab my projections. Toss those in here. Let's just run a crunch, and then we'll talk about the way that I'm like ranking my. Okay. Clint in YouTube chat, what was I saying about entering it as many of those as you can? If you have the ability to enter the like the beginner contests on DK or the no experience player stuff on FanDuel, you should not enter anything else until you've exhausted your ability to be in those. Brandon, how far do you stray from your median baseline projection? On a player impact? Besides Cruncher, what's the second most tool you use on the site? Whatever, depending on the sport, like whatever version of top stacks it is. So for baseball, it was, top hitting stacks. For NFL, it's the top QB wide receiver stacks tool. For basketball, basically boom bust. Anything that's showing me probabilities of success. In cash games single entry, would you recommend I play the highest projected lineup or the highest owned lineup? The highest projected lineup? I mean, I would probably make some tweaks for a single entry tournament because you're trying to win that contest. Whereas in cash games, it's a little bit different. All right, 400 lineups. That'll be good enough for right now. So let's export these. So I have my lineups all set up and ready to go. I refresh my workbook. All right, I have ownership in, so this is actually perfect. So in theory, I'm done. Everything is already ranked. Right now, I rank every lineup based on a couple different factors. What is really the key to it all is ranking by total fantasy points. I get rid of the lowest 10% of all of the lineups that I generated. So that counts for 50% of the weight. I rank by my implied ownership, which is going to be pretty close to the projected fantasy points as well. I also remove the 10% worst lineups in this case. And then I rank a little bit based on ownership as well. Similarly, I immediately get rid of like the most chalky lineups and the really, really, really ridiculously non-chalky lineups. And then they just simply rank from 1 to 150. So I have them here. Depending on how I see my exposures come out, I might make tweaks to this to be a little bit more contrarian, a little bit more tight to the vest to my own projections, but I can just do that by manipulating my weights here. So something like that. But right now, 76.7% Jabari Parker looks fine. I like it. A lot more LeBron now. Good to know. Adding on to Manny's question. Oh, how far do you stray from your median baseline optimal line? It's not something that I look at individually. I know it's something like Alex will run that cash crunch, make note of his top lineup. I know what my range is and where those lineups are coming in. So like in this case, my top scoring lineup is 3016. The lowest that I got to is, somewhere in the 284-ish range, maybe 283. Probably a little bit further than I would like to go. But I also normally crunch 1,000 lineups. So this is also set up for 600 more. So maybe I'll go ahead and crunch those out and give you a better idea. Adding to Manny's question, can you show how your player exposures? Can you show how you show player exposures from that crunch in Excel? Not entirely sure what you mean, Chris. If you're just looking on the screen, my player exposures are here in column BX. What's a good tiebreaker to use for players? For example, last night, Jay Crowder and Torian Prince were both 4,800 and projected identically. At that point, would you weigh usage more, team total more, ownership more, or something else? Ownership for sure. That would pretty much be it. And then if either one of those guys had like significantly different standard deviations, that would help as well. I think you said on the morning show that you were 90-something% hardened at shooting guard last night. What did the rest of your exposures at the second shooting guard spot end up looking like? I think you were off Bruce Brown a bit, but being super high on him, I was wrestling with how much of the total 200% I wanted to dedicate to the Harden-Brown pairing. On a night where I considered Harden a high-end lock and Brown a low-end lock, I went back and forth on how much to worry about missing out on some of the other good options. Honestly, the rest of shooting guard was like relatively flat. It was basically Harden at 90 and then like 7 or 8 guys at like, 10 to 25% or something. I honestly don't know off the top of my head. If you went to the end of the Live Before Lock stream, I know that I looked through all of it. You would probably be able to catch it. I don't have last night's file. I've been overriding everything. I archive my projections and stuff, but I don't archive my exposures. But it was pretty flat, like 25%. Most for anybody. If it would have been 90% Harden, 90% Brown, I wouldn't have cared. It just didn't happen to be like that. So why is my highest projected build 283 and yours is 301? Probably I'm using my projections. That's probably one thing. You shouldn't ever care what that actual number is. It only matters relative to yourself. Just because I'm projecting for 301 and 283, you project for 283, it has absolutely no bearing on what's happening here. You want to rank those things relative to yourself. But it's not as if I'm getting 301 on this top lineup right now. If I scored 301, it's probably going to be a terrible lineup. I need this to be not 301 to win regardless. So you just want to rank those according to your own crunches. But yeah, I have my own projections in here right now. My crunch is probably done, right? Yep. All right. 1,000 lineups. Let's export. Refresh. And refresh. So there we go. If the slate were locking right now, and I just had to make sure that I got my lineups in, I would be at 81% Jabari. That's always good to know. Highest projected lineup is actually 303.3, but that gets thrown away because it's too chalky. Same for my second highest projected lineup, 301.7, also too chalky. The first one I use is 301.6. Yeah, Team McBee, I don't care at all anymore about getting a lot of one particular guy. If that doesn't work out, then I just don't win that slate. But that's fine by me. Do I like tonight's slate overall? No, I don't. I think it's really ugly. Honestly. It's really just not appealing. I mean, you could tell just from looking at it, like, any night where I'm going to get 54% DeMar DeRozan and Dwayne Bacon is my second most owned shooting guard is probably going to be a little gross. When I'm putting 130% of my power forward exposure to Jabari Parker and Daniel Tice. It's probably not going to be all that fun. I just realized that I didn't know, like, every time I was sharing my screen, I didn't know what you guys could see, but you guys can absolutely see all this shit. Since I don't like tonight's slate, do I pivot to Showdown or the night slate? No, I don't. I basically don't ever enter a contest that happens after 7 o'clock. I call it a day. I'm pretty much the first person up every day. I wake up at 5:15 to start prepping cheat sheets and our events for YouTube, things like that. So I'm a really early riser. I don't really, once I get off of the Live Before Lock show, or if I'm done at night, I just set it and forget it. I get away from it, and I'm spending time with my wife for the rest of the night. That's probably to the detriment of my bankroll for a little bit, but that's just, by the time that day is over, I'm already 12 plus hours into my day. On the strategy show this morning, you and Adam spent a little time on Orlando and how putrid they are offensively. Would a matchup with a particularly bad defensive team cause you to uptick the Vooches of the world? No, not really. Not any more so than the implied total of the game would. I wouldn't like manually bump people up. Do I think ugly slates make our edge bigger over recreationals? No. So like last night, I mean, it depends what your definition of ugly is. Like last night, I think is generally going to be better for the sharps when all of the chalk does well. And on a day like last night where it's a little bit murkier, it's going to be worse. And now you can see that as evidenced by the top of the $8 in DK. Yeah, happy wife, happy life, exactly. How do I set randomness for my players? Do I base it off of standard deviation of each player and then upload it to Fantasy Cruncher, or do I use the global setting? I use 25% flat across the board for everybody. Now that, and you can see that here, I just set it to 25. I used to do it as a basis based on standard deviation, but now that smart randomness does it as sort of like a bell curve, I don't think that you need to set them individually. That's really serving the same purpose. I still have that link. Don't. Okay. Dave have it up here still? I could talk about this a little bit easier. Randomness. Nope. Yeah, so back in the day, I would have done different randomness settings, but now just using 25%. If I have somebody simulate or set up for a 50-point projection and I do 150 lineups, I'm going to get everybody in like the 44 to 56 range. And that's enough wiggle room. That's going to catch me into all of the guys that are in the same sort of area. I don't need this to look like a true distribution where I set it to 200 and I'm getting stuff where a guy can get 10 or 90. I just don't need it that big. So 25 seems to be working pretty well for me. Adam, you'll be able to go back and watch this video as well. You should be able to go back and listen to everything that's been answered so far as well. This won't just disappear into the ether. Does the Avery Bradley being out impact Green or LeBron? I didn't even know Avery Bradley was out. I haven't looked at a single thing since what's the word I'm looking? Since the strategy show. So I don't really like. If the questions are about like specifically today's slate, I don't have anything to add. Probably impacts Danny Green for like an extra minute or something, but nothing crazy. They've got plenty of dudes that can not play that particular position. Probably just gives a bump to Daniels or Caruso or something. Of course, I'm still live. I'll be live for like 20 more minutes or until my stomach rumbles again and I need to go to the bathroom. Truth. I don't like the idea of having 80% Jabari Parker tonight. Did we update our ownership yet? NBA ownership. Main slate. Nope, 5 hours ago. Okay. Jabari Parker chalk night is always scary. Yeah, today's going to be one of those days for sure. I mean, he grades out immediately when I look at it as my top play on FanDuel by a mile, and he is tops on DK as well by a comparable mile. The tops on Yahoo? Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Happy to hit on anything else anybody wants to talk about. I can go into anything. You guys, we've gotten so many questions about cash lately. I think people are just overthinking it quite a bit. So the first thing that I would do, we're just gonna hop into it like that. Where'd my Fantasy Cruncher window? Was that just this? Yes, it was. That one. So I would turn my uniques down to 1. At some point in time, I'll do that. I'm clicking, I promise. I'm on FC. All right. Open that back up again. Favorite food? You obviously weren't around when I ate 100 pizza bites on stream. That's a really it really depends where it's being prepared. Like, if it's a slice of pizza and I'm a little buzzed, that's the greatest thing I've ever had. If I'm in Asheville, I'm gonna get some squid ink paella and really enjoy myself. I'll eat. I'm just a food guy in general, but I mean, pizza is like the true fave. But I prefer DK or FanDuel. I don't know. I wax and wane. When did I transition into max entering or near max entering tournaments? Did I start after a big win or just take the risk? I saw Alex talking about it and started doing my own YouTube streams and basically started at that point. All right, let's do this. Set that to 1, 0 randomness. Actually, you know what? 25% randomness isn't going to be the worst thing in the world there. Exposure, 100%. So if I were playing cash tonight and my projections were updated, I would make a crunch. See, 90+% Jabari Parker. He's just going to be in my cash lineup. Do I agree? Smiz says FanDuel is decently softer than DraftKings. I mean, it might be for him. I don't think that is a. I think that's a hard statement to make, speaking in generalities. Only people that can do that are really the people that have the data for it. You can figure that out pretty easily for yourself by just like calculating win rates and average scores and stuff. I would guess that they're relatively equal. I don't play high stakes, Colin, so I have no idea. Okay, so if I'm doing a cash lineup, first thing I'm doing is sorting by my projected lineups, which should largely be the order that they came out. But since I have a little bit of randomness in it, there will be a little bit of wiggle. So 303.4. Trae Young is going to be more owned than 0.7% by the time we get closer to lock. These are just an archive. I would probably be pretty close to using this specific lineup, but I might try to, like, because Jabari Parker is also going to be significantly more owned. But I would probably just try to start picking off the guys that are essential cash plays, my best point per dollar plays. You're going to see that this is going to be, you sort by value, the highest value guys are going to be finding themselves into lineups quite a bit. But I would likely just be playing this particular lineup and making any individual adjustments if need be. But there's just, the difference between all. Let's say that you knew it was exact. Like, there's a win percentage of how often a projected 303.4 team beats a projected 302.5 team. Whether that's 51%, 52%, whatever. Kind of going to need to find that out on your own and see how much you can actually deviate from your optimal. But I would probably just be playing my optimal in cash or making an individual swap. Like, let's say Trae Young really was going to be 0.7% owned. I just wouldn't have Trae Young. So I'd make sure that I was getting Jabari Parker since I know that he's my best play. I'm not going to say that I'm definitely taking Daniel Tice because I don't want to pinch out an Anthony Davis lineup. But I think Jamal Murray is certainly going to be in a cash lineup given the ownership and where I have him. And I'm just going to probably skip over Trae Young. Instead of Trae Young, I'm going to grab Brogdon. And then I'm looking at 302, and I'm probably just moving forward with this lineup. It really is that sort of simple. I barely want to deviate from my optimal. I just want to make sure that I'm not taking a stand on someone individually that really isn't that kind of cash play. That's a good point, T McB. A lot of guys building cash are hand building as well. Might make sense to go through a bit of what makes someone an essential cash play and the tools to ID them. I think there's a really easy way to do that now on the website. Or maybe not necessarily easy, but more helpful. So I'm going to open up Lineup Builder. I'm going to open up, where the hell is it? Data Central. So first thing that I would do if I was going to be building cash, I'm just going to stick to FanDuel since that's what I've been talking about. But I would sort by value. Why not filter that out? Remind me to change the filters to some of this stuff. Sort by value. And then I'm going to also sort by points. No, I want that to be this one. What's going to be the easiest way to do this? I want to take the blanks out. I'm going to need to make changes to this. I'm going to put it in Excel for now. But I will fix this eventually. So this is the Data Central tab. What I'm going to do, I'm going to filter out these blanks first. So then we're sorted by value. I also want to sort this by points as well. So now all of the value grades are in order A, B, C, D, E. So you're getting the best point per dollar plays right now. You're probably not getting down into this range for cash plays. I'm going to be paying very close attention to getting the best values. And then I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to how owned a particular person is. And then I'm going to just start trying to build that manually. Now, I do like the idea of getting one of the optimal, or like knowing what my optimal score is. But if you're just using Lineup Builder, I think this is another easy way to do it. So A, getting a bunch of ownership, done. Now this is going to change because Jabari Parker, actually Alex probably has it updated already. So our ownership is not updated though. What I'm going to do is take the guys that I like the most. This isn't going to be the best way to describe it, but we have Tice and Jabari as two C points A value guys. I expect Jabari Parker's ownership number to be higher than Tice's when we get closer to it. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go to the Lakers. I'm going to add Anthony Davis. I'm going to go to Atlanta. I'm going to add Jabari Parker. DeMar DeRozan, getting ownership, A value. Just going to grab DeMar DeRozan. See where we're at so far. 59.50 remaining. Alex Len getting a decent projection now from Alex. I would like to see his ownership come up more. I'm not totally sure where that'll end up, but given where he is right now, I'm going to put him in now and see what we have for salary later. So let's do Alex Len. And then that covers us for power, forward, and center. And I already know that I have DeMar. So next up, we've still got a couple A guys here, but I'm going to try to stay in this A to B range. I'm going to try to pay pretty close attention to the ownership numbers. So Miles Bridges, 5,400 at small forward, I think is the next closest option. Pretty chalky, decent value grade. Going to be in most optimals. When I ran my crunch, you'll see that at small forward, I got to 53% Miles Bridges. So I think that seems pretty safe to say that he is going to be a fairly popular cash play. So let's get Miles Bridges. My other biggest guy that I would want to get in this spot, we've got Rudy Gay as an option, not really getting as much ownership as I would like. We still need 2 point guards, a shooting guard, and a small forward. So let's go ahead and bust this down and find 1 point guard quickly. We basically only have B value options. We're going to be picking between Kemba, Jamal Murray, and then I think Trae Young might make an appearance there once we get closer. But what I'm going to do right off the bat is grab Jamal Murray, BB, 30% ownership, save some salary. I think that feels pretty safe. Then I need a point guard, shooting guard, and a small forward, 6,500 average on everybody. Again, if I'm looking back into this B range, you can make a case for Malcolm Brogdon and Terry Rozier, but just using Alex's projections, it feels like Kemba is the most likely scenario. But I want to look at the other positions first. I need another shooting guard. I think $5,600 Marcus Smart makes some sense. B value grade. So let's do that. Let's add Marcus Smart. And again, this is for right now. How much Marcus Smart did I get? Second most owned. Great to see. We need a small forward yet. So I need small forward and point guard. I've got 13.9 to spend. I'm going to be looking to stay in this range. So it's either going to be, we already have Bridges, so we're talking about Gordon Hayward, TJ Warren, Rudy Gay. Got to be really one of those guys. If I look back at what I had going on, Rudy Gay is probably the most likely scenario. Alex is a little bit lower on Gallo. We'll see if that moves at any point, but let's go ahead and add Rudy Gay. And then finally, we need a 9K point guard, which I think I just priced myself out of Kemba by $100. I did. I'm going to just drop to Brogdon here. Sorry, guys. Let's see where we end up with Brogdon. So there, 306.19 from Alex's projections. Value ranking greater than 90. Very low contrarian ranking. I think this looks like a pretty solid lineup for cash, given that Jabari Parker's ownership is going to go up quite a bit. But that's basically the long and short of what I would do. Let's go ahead and see. Let me delete my projections and see how far off I am from the optimal. All right, so just pulling up the FanDuel projections. How do we use the Boom Bust tool specifically in Fantasy Cruncher? Yeah, for me, it's just eyeballing things. All right, let's take off the columns. Position, team, opponent, salary, value, copy. Project. Set randomness to 0. Highest projected lineup 309.57. And I got to 306.19 building it by hand. That's pretty damn good. I'm not going to lie. 98.9. That's pretty good, honestly, for an individual build. Pretty close. Optimal was Kemba, Jamal, DeMar, Danny Green, TJ Warren, Larry Nance, AD, Jabari Len. Pretty close. What else do we got here? In the lineup builder, what contrarian ranking would you want for tournaments? It depends. There's no right answer. It depends how big the contest is. If you're playing one of those 250,000 entry contests, you're going to need to be a little bit more contrarian. If you're in 1,000 or if you're in 150 entry single entry, you don't really need to be all that contrarian. The further you get away from your optimal and fantasy points, the more contrarian you'll want to be. Think about it like this. Let's say that you have a lineup, your best lineup is projected for 310 fantasy points, and you've got a lineup that's 295, but they've got very, very comparable ownership numbers in it. Why in the world would you want to take a discount on your fantasy points to have the same sort of ownership total? It's silly. If you're going to take, for every bit of fantasy points that you're giving back, you want to be slightly more unique. You want to gain what you're losing in your optimal lineup. You want to gain back in your uniqueness. Dave, first thing I would tell you to do is remove your minimum salary constraints. I'm pretty proud of hitting 306.9 on this, or 306.19 on this. Did that lineup show up? Nah, it's not in the top 10. How far do I got to go before I get to it? .306 306.19. Is this it? It is. Bam. 53rd. Okay, so by building by hand, I got to Alex's 53rd most optimal lineup. That is not bad, man. That is not bad at all. I'm proud of myself. And that's all you have to do for lineup builder. It's, it's a balancing act between figuring out the guys that are the best possible value and offsetting that, making sure that they are getting some ownership. Or just taking the optimal. But if you're doing it in a lineup builder, I think this is a pretty good approximation. You're hitting as much value as you can, and you're not being all that contrarian. And that contrarian rank is too high right now. It's going to be lower than that when this gets updated, because Alex Len is going to be owned more than 1.4%, and Jabari Parker will be more than 11. All right, 5 more minutes, guys, and then I'm going to get out of here. So if you have any questions, get them in now. Man, I really look like garbage with that scratch on my face. Here's why I would crunch without the minimum salary set. You can sort quickly and go check out how much salary you're leaving on the table. And if you're not comfortable with that particular lineup, you can quickly just swap out. So probably not going to matter all that much now, but let's just say that this was 58-8. You could just as easily be like, oh, well, then I can upgrade from Kendrick Nunn and then move forward. It's more important to me to know that I'm getting fantasy points projected well if salary's not there. It's a really good idea. Thanks, T McBee. I should probably just record that as a slightly better example. If we get another ownership update in the near future, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just clean it up. Alrighty, guys. I think that's going to be it for me. This link will exist I'll go ahead and pin this right now just in case anybody wants to get back to it. You'll be able to get to this link whenever. If you ever have any other questions, feel free to ask. Normally, I do my office hours on Mondays. Wife and I got a new car, and it came in yesterday, so we went to pick it up. So I had to bump till today. But thanks for joining me, everybody. I'll talk to you guys later. I'll be around in Slack, but good luck tonight. Bye.